Welcome back once again to the Rhetoric Prof channel. This is really part two in a look at metaphor and how metaphor might be used in speeches. So if you haven't seen the first video on making metaphor, you might want to watch that one before this one. But you also might just be interested in seeing how a metaphor works in a really great example. One of William Shakespeare's most famous sonnets, Sonnet 116. Shakespeare wrote a large number of sonnets, and I would say they all liberally employ metaphor. But I think that this one is useful on the one hand because it's probably one of his more famous metaphors, probably one of maybe the most famous sonnet. It's in the top five. But also because I think we can look on just a small part of the sonnet to understand what he might be doing that could give you some ideas of how you might use metaphor. And the point isn't to say you need to write a sonnet. The point isn't to say that you need to go out and become like Shakespeare. Though, go for it. Give it a shot. Try if you want. But more that his use of metaphor is more alive than what you might find in other places, despite the fact that it was written so many hundreds of years ago. So first, I'm going to give it a shot of reading the whole sonnet. There are much better, I haven't even done it yet, and I know there are much better performances that you can find all over the place. I know that Patrick Stewart recently on Twitter has been reading through all of the sonnets. I'm not sure that he's made it to Sonnet 116 yet. I think he has, actually. I think he's up to the 120s. So you might check out a great actor, a great Shakespearean actor, how they perform it. But I'll give it a shot just for the purposes of this video. And you can critique me in the comments if you really object to my reading. One of the reasons that you have to kind of read the sonnet is that in the pronunciation of it, in the delivery of it, you're making choices about its meaning. And those choices might change as you begin to understand the sonnet in a different way. But I'll give it a shot anyway. Let me not to the marriage of true minds admit impediments. Love is not love, which alters when it alteration finds, or bends with the remover to remove. Oh no, it is an ever-fixed mark that looks on tempests and is never shaken. It is the star to every wandering bark, whose worth's unknown, although his height be taken. Love's not time's fool, though rosy lips and cheeks within his bending sickle's compass come. Love alters not with his brief hours and weeks, but bears it out even to the edge of doom. If this be error, and upon me proved, I never writ, nor no man ever loved. So it's a nice poem. It's a love poem. It's a very classic love poem. And the part of it that I really want to look into is the idea of love as an ever-fixed mark. So it really only occupies one quatrain, we could say, set of 4 lines in the poem. But I think in these 4 lines, the ones that I've just highlighted, he does a number of things that you might think about when you're trying to invent your own metaphor. So first of all, what is this ever-fixed mark? We see in this line here, it's a star. But he doesn't begin by calling it a star. So he doesn't say love is a star and then go through all the various things that a star has that love has. He begins with what is the most salient predicate that he wants you to get out of it. He doesn't say, oh, love is really fiery. I mean, you could say that, right? You could say that. You could say love is best at night. That might be your opinion. I really don't know. But he wants to talk about this part of love because it's the whole point of the poem, is that love doesn't change as you age. Even when the beauty of youth is gone, love remains, okay? That's what we're trying to get at. But then immediately from that, it is an ever-fixed mark that looks on tempests and is never shaken. So the idea is that we're out at sea, and that's when you're going to be looking to the stars, especially in the 16th or 17th century. The stars helped you to navigate. And so it's speaking to an audience that probably weren't themselves at sea, but would be familiar with this idea that you would take your direction from the star. What would be a scary thing to happen at sea? A tempest. But we take it now from the position of the star, that the star looks on this storm. A tempest, in addition to being a name of a great play by Shakespeare, is a storm. That's what it is. So that even as the sea itself is being shaken, as the people who are taking the direction from the star is not. And that makes me think that love is something outside of just the relationship between the two people. It's actually not something that's in my heart or in your heart, though in other sonnets he does kind of say things like that. But it's something that is over and above us, fixed. And I take my direction from it. Now, that's a very new idea about love, at least for me. We tend to think about love, at least in my culture, as being a feeling, something that's inside of me. It's very strange to say that love is a mark fixed in the sky above you that you look up to. If I am in love, why isn't love in me? But here he shows you the benefit of taking that different perspective. Because as things get rocky, as there's some storms in your life, you can still look up and see something that isn't rocking, which is love itself. And your love has to take its direction from love with a capital L. I think that's a pretty interesting thing to remark upon in a poem. And he develops that in the next two lines. It is the star to every wandering bark. Okay, so first of all, bark means boat. You can think of this is another metaphor, could even be a metonym. We don't need to get into it. But the idea of a bark as a ship, it's wandering around, it's trying to get its direction, as I had already said. But now he's saying that love guides all of us. So it's not that all of these ships are going to the same place. It's not all of these ships have anything to do with each other, but that everybody has to look up to love, the idea of love, to get their direction. And that makes me now feel like love is something kind of communal, but not communal because we all love each other, but because love is an ideal that we all have to respond to if we want to find direction in life. And then he says, whose worth's unknown, that is the star, although his height be taken. Now this requires a little bit of knowledge about the practices in the time. There's something called a sextant, where a little instrument that you would use in order to find your direction on a boat by taking the height of the star. Where's the star in the sky? And that would help you find your direction. The details of it, I don't think are that important. But then you have this weird moment, whose worth's unknown, although his height be taken. And he adds in this other kind of attitude. Because when you are in a ship, and I said all these nice things about being in a ship, the nice metaphor of love, it's very practical. The stars, you don't look upon the stars and gaze upon them the way a stargazer does and just marvel at the beauty. These stars are for a practical end. I'm trying to get my goods to port. I'm basically on a business venture. Most of these ships were. This isn't actually as poetical as it seemed. So we need to use love is in fact one of the attitudes that comes out of this poem. Everyone has to use love, even if what they're pursuing might be something very different. And that's that idea of the worth's unknown. The worth of a star. I mean, what could a star be worth? It's not part of that normal exchange of goods or commodities that would be associated at this time with naval expedition. It was really, a lot of it was about money. In The Merchant of Venice, Antonio, who's the Merchant of Venice, says, I don't need to worry about my money. I have 3 different ships out. So I've basically diversified my portfolio. So if you were a big-time investor, you wouldn't be going for Bitcoin. You wouldn't be going for Apple. You'd be investing in sea expeditions. That's where you're going to make money. That's where you're going to find profit. Though it doesn't turn out so well for Antonio in the play, but go read that if you're interested. So the fact that love has both this practical side and that people use love even when they don't understand its value adds a whole nother dimension to this poem that I think if you just read it the first time through and you say, oh yeah, that's a pretty poem about love, all of the possible predicates that he gets out of making love like a star give us a totally different view on love. It is not only that it's fixed because we're faithful to it, but even people who aren't particularly faithful to love still use love. What might that mean? What might be an example of somebody taking the measure of love for their own purposes without knowing its worth. Let me know, and thanks again for coming to the channel, and stay tuned for more videos about rhetoric, language, speech, argument, all the good stuff right here on the Rhetoric Prof channel.